And when I talk to people, and that's because of some lesson I learned from a lady I call Auntie Ida. She said, I like to stand because it's not to look down on you, but I stand in respect of you. So I thought that was a good lesson to learn. And it's culture and practice. So, first of all, the Nachish to Kwanlindan for allowing us to access their traditional territory, to the coordinators of this gathering who invited me here to be among you. I do appreciate that. And this is some opening comments that I did for another meeting. Nehi of the Katiwan, welcome all of you. Gonna change Hadi and Adi, thank you for coming here. Aktawasigu ye go one ye da Hakai ka Jamasa Piyanuk. I would like to offer you encouragement and support in working with whatever you do. And this was for our languages, and I was just commenting on how important they are. And anybody object to an opening prayer? No? Gonna change the key on power yaw hot sheen see at yagi hot in tea hot to look at hot car yanjisatan again katusa off it ya or the skadifnikia hayake jisatan yagi cut jetlak ye could get a gulp in a year. Thank you, God, for leading us here today. Be with us, touch our minds and hearts so that we will listen to what's being taught or being told. Bless us today and always. We have come to you with this prayer. Amen. This little story is about the Jackson Johnson family. My mom is a tiny little woman with two long names. Mom came to hear on me. That little woman bore 10 kids. Her Tlingit name is Yetudan Deflect, and her English name is Lizzie, or Elizabeth is her formal name, and she was often known as Lizzie or Mrs. Bobby. Dad is Yahoo's and Bobby Thomas Jackson. The trap line covered a large area with the base camp at Johnsontown, 45 miles south on Teslin Lake. The lake straddles the Yukon and British Columbia borders. The area was used by a number of families. As they died off, my brothers and my dad took over the lines. So it was quite big, quite large area. My mom was born there in Johnsontown, BC in May 13, 1909. But Dad's family traveled back and forth between there and Alaska. Dad was born in a place called Taku Harbor, south of Juneau. We went on a workshop going on a year ago now. And the guy was really nice. He knew that my dad was born there. So we went up there. And Well, I could see why they chose that area, because it was nice, cold, just really narrow opening from the ocean, so really protected area. It's really pretty, and I was glad I got there. Dad was born in 1909, and said he was only 6 years old the last time they came over. They traveled along the Nakama and Taku rivers. The Tlingit names are Nagina'o and Aho. Along these rivers they had cabins which were well stocked with all they would need when they returned. These were basic needs such as cook stoves and heaters, usually the 45-gallon drums, and pots and pans, dishes, etc. Dad was baptized in the Russian Orthodox Church in Juneau. I was fortunate to attend a church service there a couple of times too. He and others had certificates and medallions from this church. These and other papers and things were left behind in the attics of their cabins in the prospect of their return at some point. Somehow they never did go back there, but learned later these cabins were raided and ransacked. Everything was lost to them, but they still carried on. Some of the people kept the medallions. You know, they were really nice, and I think my mom's dad was buried with his. I don't know who else had them, but they said there was lots of them in Tesman anyway. They had a cabin at Johnsontown also that had the basics they would need. From this base camp, they had trap lines that ran in various directions. The cabins were here, the lake is here. My one brother went across the lake, and another one went south, farther on the lake. And my dad used to go up from Johnsontown, up the hill, and Mom even had a little line, maybe no more than probably 3/4 to 1 mile long. But she would run that too. She set mini snares for rabbits and small game, you know, and she would get grouse there, to bring home for suppers and all that. And one day she ran her line, and she went right to the Jennings River. You know, Jennings River is right close to our cabins. She got to the very last trap, and there was a lynx in it, a nice big one. She was so happy with that. Yeah, some of those lines were long enough to use their dog teams and run their traps, and sometimes even to overnight. I tried driving a dog team too. I think I lasted maybe 15 minutes, and it was, the dogs were just fresh and they were just booting it down the lake. I let go of the handlebars, and fortunately my brother was ahead of me. He stopped the team, and he let Dad take over again. And my brother told me, lesson number 1, Bess, never let go of the handlebars. I said, now you tell me. I never tried it again. Yeah. Teenagers, 15 years old, figured she knew everything, huh? A big boat and small motor were used to get to Johnstown in the summer and fall. In the winter, travel was done on foot and dog teams. Small children were bundled up into the sled for traveling, and I have seen my mother in this position too. Most of the time, Mom would walk for a little while, and my dad or my brother would say, "Okay, get on," and she'd ride up on top of the load just like a queen. He did that, my brother did that with pack sacks too. She always had a little pack sack like that, carried her needles and thread and medicines and all that. So anyway, that would get heavy for her, so she would just hand it over to my brother. My brother was tall, lanky, and he could travel really well. Okay, and when she wasn't on a sleigh, one of Dad's favorite stories about her is she used to break trail for me and my dog team wearing snowshoes that were bigger than her. And he said she always ran too. She never walked, she ran all day long. There are two types of snowshoes. The smaller ones, called walking snowshoes, are fairly narrow with pointed toes, whereas the larger ones, called trail-breaking snowshoes, are wider with rounded toes. Golly, the shoes must have been about that wide in front. And then with snow on it, they're quite heavy. So, excuse me a minute.
Right here. Is he right this side right here?
Thanks, Shirley. Oh, thank you. I hope it's not.
Oh, look, there's yours for you, okay?
Thanks. Travel was done in all conditions, weather conditions and ice conditions, similar to today, I guess. A couple of examples of this are, my brother Frank had a dog that was a lead dog. The dog was good size, one you wouldn't think would be in a team, but he was. He was a German Shepherd cross. But he was very good. That dog knew that when they would leave Tesley, he would head straight for Sandpoint. There's a point on this side of the lake. That's where he'd be headed. Once he got there, you can look up the lake, and there's a big, long point up there called Boundary Line Point. That's where he would be going. And once at Boundary Line Point, then up the river or up the lake on the other side of the lake, there's a point we call Swift River Point. That's where he'd be going. And that would be about 15 miles or so this side of Johnstown. And from Swift River Point, then he would head for the cabins at Johnstown, and the reverse would be when he was coming back. He knew that way too. He knew the way instinctively, even in bad weather. This dog also led the way over bad ice, dodging all the weak spots. March travel started early in the day while there was a good crust on the snow. My mom told a story about her dad, Grandpa Shorty. Among the other men, he left Johnstown, headed for Teslin with sleigh loads of fur to sell and to stock up on groceries. I remember those loads Perhaps I must have been about that high. All fur. So the dogs are traveling well over frozen crust. So Grandpa decided he would ride on a sleigh. He was sitting up on top of the load, riding like a king, when the lead dog his dog named Buster, came across a very fresh moose trail. Well, this was too much for Buster. He made a sharp right turn this way. Grandpa went that way. Grandpa was just so angry at that dog. And Grandpa was unprepared for this, and he went sailing straight ahead while Buster turned right, hot on the trail of a moose. Grandpa was very indignant, sitting on the ice, shaking his fist at the departing sleigh and dogs, and he's sitting on the ice yelling, "Buster, you SOB, come back here." Buster was not having any of this. He couldn't care less. He was going after a moose. Soon Grandpa got up, went after his team, found them all tangled up in the bush. And he unsnarled them and drove them hard the rest of the way to Teslin. He didn't waste time in Teslin. He sold his furs, brought groceries, loaded up his sleigh, and headed back to Johnsontown, arriving there before sundown. This was March, so days were nice and long. The dogs were so tired, they lay heaving on the ground when Grandpa finally stopped in front of the cabins. When Grandma saw this, she really went after Grandpa for doing that to the dogs. She told him, no matter what, you never do that to animals. Poor little Grandpa, he was the size of Mom, I think. And Grandma was quite hefty. He must have been shaking in his boots. Springtime is beaver hunting time. I was fortunate that I was with my family at this time. Upon reflection, I realized that I really experienced spring because I was very much aware of everything around me coming back to life. It might be amazing since I was still only about 15 then. Instead of thinking about town and all that, I was thinking about what's happening around me. And the leaves were coming out, the songbirds were singing, migratory birds were on the water below the cabins. Beavers and muskrats swimming among them. There was a popular song out then. Some of you might remember it's called The Theme from a Summer Place by Percy Faith. Beautiful song. And every time I heard that song, I would think Johnsontown is my summer place. Mom and I got one of those beavers one day while my dad and brothers went out looking for beavers. They were pleasantly surprised for us when they came back and saw our trophy. Beaver wasn't very big, but we got him. In earlier days, Dad had gone for a walk, and this would be from Johnsontown. The cabins are here, Jennings River is here, and there's a big long point here. We call it Huckeye, gravel point, I guess. At the time, there wasn't anything growing on it, so we, anyway, that's where Dad went. I don't know what he was doing, but anyway, he had lost his pocket knife in the process. And he asked Mom to go out to look for it as he and the other men were going to go out for a few days hunting. Mom did go, and she did find it, and she brought the knife back. upon returning to camp, she started working on tanning her moose hide. At lunchtime, my younger brother and I begged her to stop and cook us some bannock. While we were in the cabin, the dogs started barking outside. So Mom went out to have a look, and from the main cabin there's an attached storage area, and they use slats, and the slats weren't tight together. They were maybe like so all around. So it was nice and cool and everything in there. Anyway, Mom started walking out the door and happened to look up. In between the slats, she saw a big grizzly bear. The grizzly was following her trail that she had made the day before. So anyway, we were cooking bannock, and Mom took it off the stove right away to so the smell wouldn't go out. And she did something that I really didn't know before, I guess. She grabbed some of her clothes, just her own clothing, and opened up the stove, shoved them inside, and set fire to them. Fortunately, the wind was blowing just right, so it carried the smoke this way and right to the bear. And the bear didn't like that smell, so he just turned around and left. But I don't think we went back outside after that, even though it was still, say, midday. And Mom was watching out the window. You know, one of the windows could open. So she was watching to see if the bear was coming closer, because there was just Grandma, Mom, my one brother, and myself, and all we had was a .22. So Mom was watching anyway, and just out of the corner of her eye, she caught a movement. Here Grandma was walking from her house to ours. And Mom just told her as quietly as she could, go back, something has come to us. And Grandma heard, and she went back to her cabin. I don't think she had a rifle either. But anyway, that acrid smoke was carried to the bear, and that drove it away from camp. And the dog didn't help either, just a little dog like that, mixed breed, making so much noise. So the bear decided to leave us without causing us any trouble. And a couple more stories, I guess, just from around camp. My brother Frank knew of this little lake across the lake, so he said he was going to go and watch beaver. You know, and you go and watch for them to come up in the water, and if it's a good one, you know, good-sized one, then they would use a .22 to shoot it. And anyway, we went over, and it was just a short little walk from the main lake. And he was carrying canvas boat on his back, and they used canvas would be on the outside, but they carved willows, maybe about like so, and that was the framework for their boat. So it was quite light. Took it up there. And we he rode us out to the middle. We sat there for a while, and I was thinking about something, I don't know what. Anyway, Frank was in the middle of the boat, and I was in the back, and all of a sudden a beaver came up, nice big one, and clanked right beside me. I jumped, and Frank just laughed at me. We got back to camp, and he told Mom about how I jumped. And he said he just laughed, he couldn't help laughing. Your poor sister, she could have drowned in that lake. But Frank didn't think it was so funny anymore. And there was another time that there was a grizzly coming back up the lake too. And Mom had gone to get a little pail of water, and she came back to the cabin and told them that there's a moose coming up. I think it's a moose. So Frank went to look. He came back and told Mom, not a moose, Mom, something else. It was a grizzly. But before I got to the cabins, went up in the bush. And I think Mom made another fire too, real smoky ones. And fortunately, that one didn't bother us either. Oh, they're scary, they're so big. And we would go cross country too from a place called Lower Hazel Creek. That's my dad's base, one of base camps too, or fly camps. And that's on the highway by, just about to, a little ways past Morley. We would sometimes travel cross country like that too, on snowshoes. And we walked in the springtime. And anyway, that's where my other brother, Winston, he'd take Mom's pack sack and throw it up on his. It took us 4 days, I guess. We left that camp on May the 9th. And we all had pack sacks and dog packs and all that. We traveled. And my brother Winston, every so often would shinny up a tree, have a look around and see where we were. He'd come back and say to Dad, well, I see this mountain over there and this mountain over here, and there's a little lake over there, whatever. And they'd figure out where we are and which way we had to go then, because we had no map and we were down on the ground anyway. But we got to Wilson Bay. That one is 15 miles from Johnsontown. And we ended up on the north side of the bay. So my brother had to walk around that whole bay to go and get a boat from Johnsontown and come pick us up. Anyway, we got there on May 13th, my mom's birthday. And Dad told us just stay here. He says, make some fire, and I'm gonna go and see if I can get us a beaver. So he knew where this beaver was, and he walked up into the bush to get it. And he came back and packed a sack full of beaver. So we had a good birthday dinner for Mom. And Dad skinned the beaver out. Really did a good job of it. And then he went and got some more of those saplings and made a frame to put the beaver hide in. And he laced it all in, nice and tight. Great big beaver. They call them the largest ones a blanket beaver. And And anyway, when he was finished, looked at it, and yeah, looks good. Not much fat on it, hardly any, if any. And the fur looks good, he says. And so he just took that round frame, rolled it over to Mom. No, Shaladi, he says, here, my woman, my wife, happy birthday. She got a good price for it too. When in June we went back to Tesla to sell all the furs. Yeah. And like I say, Mom and I had our own little line there. We'd go there quite often. And Mom had another story about those canvas boats. And of course, 5-horsepower motor is about all that most people could afford in those days. So this little boat was maybe that long from there. And one guy, she said, had this motor on it, a 5-horse motor. And he said he was going to go up the Jennings River. And this was at breakup time. And also the river was in full flood. Mom said the guy, I forget his name now, didn't get very far. The current was so strong, he just stopped the boat like that. So the guy was sitting in the middle of the Jennings River, motor running wide open. He was going nowhere. So, and of course our first language is Tlingit. So all of this was, when Mom would tell us something, it's all in Tlingit. And beaver hunting season ends in BC in mid-June, so it is time to go back to Tesla. This is a life that is long gone now, but is a precious memory that cannot be taken from me. It is a priceless treasure. I used to think, when I look around people around town, gee, everybody had more than we did all the time. So, but yet, I remember one of my aunties coming to my mom saying, "Shut, older sister, can I borrow your fishnet?" So basic things like that, that we had at home. And especially at Christmas time, I used to think, boy, if Dad had some more money, we could afford some of these fancy goods too. But I've written in here because later on I realized this is a priceless treasure. Mom and Dad gave us themselves, loving, teaching, and their time. No amount of money can buy that. I wish I had realized that before they passed on, But some say they know anyway. I hope so. It is my hope that my story conveyed to you that a life on a track line is a life of learning, invaluable family time, and having respect and appreciation for having what you do have. You're out in the bush, and where there is no store to run to when the need arises. I hope it did. Some of my lifestyle, my culture, and some of the teachings that Mom and Dad gave us. Most of all themselves. Just so dumb, why didn't you think of it then? But better late than never, I guess, eh? Right now, I'll just leave it as such and answer any questions you might have. Or listen to any comments.
你说你的你反正
Gee, I really appreciate you telling us stories, Bessie. Thank you.
Yes.
Somebody said too, you know how at home there are some people that are gifted in making snowshoes and all that. And somebody commented, you know, good thing he knew how to make snowshoes. And finally I just said, you know, every family had a snowshoe maker because we were also spread out. Some will go here and there, over here, and up there in the Sutherland River, up on the mountains. So to begin with, how in heaven's name would they get from Johnsontown to 100 Mile on the Sutherland without snowshoes? So they never think, you know, just beyond the here and now, I guess.
It's like that, I guess, because people, they never lived like that. Everything was in a store. Yeah, if you didn't know how to make those kind of things, or you didn't have anybody to trade with, you sure could be stuck out there in the bush. You know, when I tell young kids that, especially when they're learning the language, I tell them you can't take a shortcut with the language, because then if you don't know how to speak and you're out in this kind of weather, you wouldn't know how to look after yourself, because all of that knowledge is in the language. It's like that. I remember your brother Frank too, when you were talking about him, he came into my mind.
I thought you did when I noticed the expression on your face.
Yeah, I was thinking about him. Oh, he was a nice man. I really liked him. He used to come wherever I was working. I think first time when I was working at CBC, he would stop in and visit with me. Then later on, when I was working at CYFN, he'd stop in and visit with me. And then when I was working at Northern Native Broadcasting, he would stop in and visit with me. Gee, I miss those old timers. I sure miss them when they come to town. I always check on everybody,
My husband and I am Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, and my husband and I from Northern Ontario. My husband and I took over my grandfather's trap line, and we used to take the kids on the trap line, and they used to complain, you know,